Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first of a series of seminars run by BDO's Global Outsourcing Business, and especially welcome to all of our partners, clients, and organizations around the world that have logged on. We have people on from Cambodia, Denmark, Canada, Argentina, Saudi Arabia, and obviously Hong Kong as well. This is the first of a number of events, specifically on multi-country payrolls. This webinar specifically will be dealing with some practical ideas for a successful implementation, taking you through pre-decisioned considerations through to the best practice implementation. Throughout the next 12 months, we'll be running a series of other events focusing on other areas of BDO Global Outsourcing, specifically international accounting services and global compliance reporting. Before we start, you will see, as you've logged on to the webinar tool, we will be presenting for 45 minutes, and then there are two areas on the right-hand side of your screen, one that says Q&A and one that says chat. If you do have specific questions, please send those specific questions through Q&A. And we will also monitor the chat as well. Any questions coming up on chat, we will not deal with them immediately, but we will deal with the chat questions for about 30 minutes after the seminar itself. As an introduction, let me just run you through the agenda. But before we do that, what I'd like to do is just introduce the other panelists that are joining me today. We're very, very fortunate to have the team from Hong Kong. Just to give you a little bit of my background, I am the head of Global Payroll Services for BDO. My background, I have 25 years experience in HR outsourcing that started in payroll at a company called Ceridian, and then moved into global relocation services for an organization called Prudential based in the US, and then I've come full circle back to global payroll, combining the expertise of managing and running operations in multiple countries around the world to the global payroll business today. I'd like to just now hand over to my team in Hong Kong, just for them to do a very quick introduction as well. Joseph and Portia.
Hi, thank you, Stephen. Hi, I'm Joseph Hong. I have over 20 years of experience in provision of and leading engagements on payroll, taxation, HR advisory, management and financial accounting, and other business process outsourcing services to the multinational corporation in Hong Kong and Macau. So I'm now passed to Portia for introduction.
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name is Portia Tang. I'm the Client Service Director at BDO Hong Kong. I have over 15 years of experience in the provision of professional services, including outsourcing services to multinational clients. I'm responsible for managing significant client relationships and project management of cross-divisional and cross-border projects. So that's it. Stephen, pass back to you.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. If there are, Joseph, Portia, if there are areas you'd like to contribute through the conversation that we have, please just step in and add to that. But thank you very much for being online, and really appreciate those people who are dialing on either very early in the morning or very late into the evening. If I just very quickly run through the agenda of what we're going to cover. First, I just do a very quick overview of BDO as an organization and then the multi-country payroll market, and then go into what we call the pre-decision area, which is around clients, analysis and planning, and our recommended approach to analysis and planning. Then clearly into how do you manage risk and compliance throughout that implementation, looking at resources and governance, And then we'll move on to the Hong Kong case study, where Joseph and Portia will be able to take you through a real-life example of an implementation of a multi-country payroll at a local level, so that you can really understand the level of detail that is required to be successful. And then from a client perspective, some elements around setting internal expectations, and then looking at systems integration, knowledge and expertise. That works smoothly. For those of you that don't know BDO, BDO is one of the largest audit and advisory firms in the world, with offices around, with about 1,400 offices worldwide, with a turnover in excess of $7.3 billion. We have a real focus on delivering outstanding client services through people, both at a global level and a local level, and those are the things that we're going to bring out in the presentation today. If I look at more specifically multi-country payrolls, there's a couple of really important areas to consider about BDO and our capability. One is our experience. We have over 15 years experience delivering multi-country payrolls around the world. And really uniquely, we have physical operations in 154 countries and over 3,000 payroll specialists there to deliver payrolls around the world. They are delivering on a monthly basis over 390,000 pay slips to 4,700 clients around the world. What this actually means is it means that you've got a really experienced organization delivering service on a global scale. A really great thing that's just happened over the last month, for the second year running, we've also been awarded as the International Payroll Provider of the Year for the second year running. Just a little bit about the market. Generally, the payroll market is a pretty mature market. There's an increasing number of vendors who are entering the cloud payroll market, but the multi-country payroll service market is still delivered today in the same way as it was probably about 20 years ago when I was working over at another organization. The big difference between the multi-country payroll market today is how fast it's growing. The value of the multi-country payroll market is valued at about will be valued at about $21 billion by 2019, and is growing 3 times faster than the domestic payroll market, which is pretty mature today. This is really being driven through global business wanting to take advantage to emerging markets. If you look at those emerging markets of the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and what they classify as the civic countries, Colombia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Egypt, Turkey, and South Africa, when you've got big organizations, the likes of Apple, the likes of Starbucks, that want to expand into those markets, that is what's driving the requirement for multi-country payrolls and multi-country services being coordinated on a global level. There is also a real increase in complexity at a local level. The more and more local payrolls become complex, the more difficult it is for organizations to run their compliance on a global basis. And that is the reason why people are looking at multi-country, single contract to try and simplify that. From a technology standpoint, there is a real movement around mobile and cloud technology. So there is a combination of how do you deliver local services, but also utilize the best technology, so you've got local services and people delivered through the best technology in the world. Before we get into that, one of the things I talked about on the first couple of slides was about pre-decision. We would like you to be really, really sure that outsourcing is the right choice for you. There are 4 real options in the marketplace for running your payroll. There are some great HR platforms and in-house platforms out there where you can run your payroll at a local level or sometimes multi-country. There are also in-house bureau options available, which are local or regional in option, and then there's also outsourced payroll, of which you get from the many BDO offices around the world that can be run at either a local or a regional level. The piece we're talking about today is very specifically when you're looking at how do I globally outsource to a single vendor in a multi-country environment. And that's what we're going to focus on today. The key drivers for why people look to outsource is through what we call this target operating model. Today, from our experience, 90% of companies want to try and reduce their costs or control costs and increase the control and compliance of global payroll operations. We've got many, many examples when we do an implementation where we then discover that they're running with significant legislative and compliance risks, and that requires a huge amount of management when you're doing an implementation. By outsourcing the payroll function, what you allow is the provider to operate as an extension to your HR, finance, payroll, or shared service function, and it will move the administrative services from an operational fixed head to a variable cost driven by the employee numbers in the countries and by the complexity of the payrolls that you're running. This centralization of function through the use of leading class technology allows you to get better visibility and better control for how you want to operate. There are really 6 key areas around the analysis and planning that we certainly feel ensure success or failure of an implementation of multi-country payrolls. The first I would highlight, what I would call governance, or we've got on here is stakeholder alignment, is ensuring that the clients you're talking to have got stakeholders at a senior level in finance, HR, procurement, legal, IT, or possibly shared service center lined up and supporting what you're doing from a multi-country payroll perspective. In our experience, up to 70% of the opportunities that initially come through to us do not turn into an implementation because they do not have the internal stakeholder alignment at a client. The next 3, 2, 3, and 4 are really about the vendor. When you're doing your internal analysis, have a true and real understanding of what your vendor costs are. An awful lot of organizations find that very, very difficult to try and understand what the vendor costs truly are at a local level. There is also significant costs around managing those vendors. Many of you who are running global organizations, if you work in either procurement or legal, you will recognize the difficulties in managing multiple suppliers in multiple locations around the world. So having that as a cost and a consideration is a really significant part of what you're looking at. Also, when you're looking and evaluating your contracts, at a local level, there will be multiple contracts you will have with a multi-country payroll that you have to review internally. Understand what your termination clauses are, and I'll tell you now, we have come across examples where we have had taken on a multi-country payroll where we're doing a local transition, and when we talk to a local firm that we're transitioning from, there is not a transition service agreement in place, and it is very difficult transitioning data across from current vendors to new vendors. So check your contractual obligations, have a look at your terminations, have a look at your obligations, and ensure that there is good transition service agreements in place as well. And then internally, the last 2 that you're looking at is have a realistic view of what your true IT costs are to support your current activity. As you move to cloud environments, those internal IT costs will reduce, but certainly what we find is there are significant IT costs of running, certainly in-house and bureau payroll, certainly. And then the other really big significant, I've seen some organizations that do this really, really well, is an evaluation of the true full-time equivalent cost headcount expectations that you've had. Understand what you have going into the analysis and planning, and then understand the expectations that you have once you come out of the other side, and what does your headcount want to be once you've outsourced the service. The next slide is really about how do you manage risk. Managing risk is obviously not through just implementation, but it is a really significant part of that implementation process. And managing risk at every stage is part of the DNA that BDO brings to an implementation. Firstly, complete that country audit. Do an audit, understand what is what's in each of the local levels, what's in each of the local countries, and understand the complexity and any issues that you may have. If you have got an issue, deal with it immediately. Reviewing the current vendors and identifying the concerns. Make sure from a contractual standpoint that before you start, all of your contracts are signed, not just an MSA, but also Master Services Agreement, but also the local contracting and obligations that you have down to a local level. And then two of probably the most important elements come around data protection and personal information is absolutely paramount, and identify systems and processes and potential security risks that you would have through moving to a multi-country environment, and ensure that your provider is very, very robust around those areas, and ensure that they have the right control framework in place to manage that on a global basis. In terms of resources and project governance, ensuring there's an integrated implementation team, both globally from your vendor, and also, more importantly, at a local level as well. So the implementation is globally and locally. And really, really importantly, if you, as a client, do not have the internal resource to act as a project management internally, and you do not have sponsorship at a board level, implementing multi-country payroll will be very, very tough indeed. So ensuring you have that governance and you have those resources in place are absolutely fundamental. For us, there are also three core components to a successful implementation. I split them into three areas. One is understanding, which is as you're getting into understanding how do you map current costs and how do you transform to the best operating model. The second is how do you then start to prioritize which countries you go first, and where there is the particular areas of compliance risk that need fixing. And then the third is how do you improve, and how do you sit down and at every stage of the implementation sit down and say, what have we learned, and go through a robust process at each phase and look at what we do to improve at every single phase as well. And really importantly, our best scenario is, because we're very, very fortunate as an organization to have operations in 154 countries, most of the time we would prefer to use BDO firms around the world. There are some situations, because there are, I think it's 196 countries around the world, we sometimes have to go externally and find an alternative vendor. If we do that, we go through a rigorous due diligence process of identifying the size, experience, technical capability of that organization to ensure that we have the right partners in place to manage that as well. And then what we do is we put them into a vendor management life cycle, where we go through a robust measuring and monitoring process throughout the cycle. A lot of organizations want us also to benchmark at a local level to ensure that we are competitive at a pricing standpoint, so that is one of the things that does come up on a regular basis. Okay, now I'd like to hand over to give you a flavor of what it's like when you look at doing a local implementation. And I'd like to hand over to Portia and Joseph that will take you through a multi-country payroll implementation from a local perspective. And I think this is a really useful way for you to get to an understanding of the real complexity and the reason why you have to select your vendor very, very carefully. Portia, okay. Joseph, over to you.
Yep.
Hi.
Yep, thanks, Stephen. Actually, before I let Joseph sharing our first-hand experience on a very recent client project as part of the Global Payroll Services team, I would like to let everyone know a little bit about BDO. in Hong Kong. BDO in Hong Kong is actually the fifth largest accounting firm in Hong Kong with about 50 partners and directors and over 1,000 staff. And more importantly, we would like to share with you, which we are very proud of, is that we are the most sizable accounting firm in Hong Kong with the longest history in continually providing business and outsourcing services. We have been in the market for over 30 years providing business and outsourcing services, and specifically for payroll, we have been here for 20 years. So we have, our professionals have some of our professionals like Joseph has been with us for over 20 years. BDO Hong Kong is not just a local partner in helping to implement and execute global payroll projects. We are actually the Asia-Pac regional hub for project management services. We have a team of very experienced project management professionals who can help clients to manage and coordinate their payroll and other professional services projects in the Asia-Pac region. So if you would like to find out more in the future, please feel free to contact us. And I'm also happy to answer any questions in the Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. And without further ado, I shall pass on to Joseph to start his sharing with you a very typical client example that we have picked, the issues we commonly encounter, and how we did to help resolving them. Over to you, Joseph.
Thank you, Portia. Good morning, everyone. I'm Joseph Hong. I'm pleased to share our experience of multi-country payroll implementation for the Hong Kong office of a global cosmetic company. This payroll implementation process consisted of 4 phases. Firstly, the build phase. This phase aims to ensure BDO Global Payroll Service Team, BDO Hong Kong, and clients management stakeholder alignment of the outsourcing strategy and scheduled time frame. This includes several steps, like the exchange of process and transactional knowledge of the in-scope services and outline the client's requirement, local compliance, sample reports, and sample payslip format in the business blueprint, build and develop payroll system in order to meet with client's requirement. For example, we set up the client's database, wage type, wage and GL codes, etc. in our system. Then we are moving to the migration of the HR master data and historical payroll data from client systems to BDO Hong Kong's payroll systems. The other step which is important is to verification and to verify the correctness and the completeness of the migrated data. Then the other most important matters that we need to take care of is to understand the client's requirement on the payroll disbursement procedures, which is including the method of payment of the net salary and mandatory provident fund contribution to the employees. The mandatory provident funds, the short form is MPF, which is the only Hong Kong pension which is statutorily required to be complied. At this stage, we had come across with obstacles and had overcome that by applying our local knowledge. For example, we have taken our initiative to liaise with client's Hong Kong banker and the MPF trustee directly in order to sort out the correct format of files and procedures for processing of payment of net salary and the MPF contribution for clients' employees. These are very important because if we are doing something wrong in the file processing, then the employee would not get paid, and the MPF contribution would not be made into the employee's account on time. So the next phase is the test phase. The test phase, which start with BDO Hong Kong's professional attending the training organized by BDO Global Payroll Service on the usage of the designated email and payroll portals as the tools to communicate with clients and upload, download of the payroll input-outputs. BDO Hong Kong then need to conduct the parallel run and the penny test run for our clients' review and approval. Well, this including some of the report review, bank payment file process and general ledger journal and the payslip approval. So BDO Hong Kong will need to agree on the payroll calendars for the upcoming month, which is from the go live in October up to December 2016 with the clients. Well, at this stage, we also come up with some of the obstacles, which we overcome it by directly communicated with our clients' Hong Kong bankers. In some occasions, because the file generated for the bank payment is not smoothly done in one go. So there are several files exchanged in order to get the approval from the banker. Then the penny test run payment to the employee's account are eventually processed. So here comes the third phase, which is the deploy phase. This phase aims to obtain all the payroll actual data from client and get it ready for the go live run. The go live run is in October, so we have to gather all the actual payroll data for the period from July to September 2016 from client and upload the same into our systems before go live in October. Then we need to verify the correctness and completeness of all the payroll data uploaded to the system. So when we confirm that this, we will let the client know that this has been done and everything is ready for go live. So finally, all the previous three stages are completed. We are ready for go live. The go live stage started with clients uploading of the payroll changes of October, which is the real changes for our handling. So we then prepare the October gross to net calculation, generation of the reports and bank payment files, submission of all this to the clients through the portal for their approval at the agreed due date. So BDO Global Payroll Service also scheduled certain high-park calls for the clients and BDO Hong Kong's attendance in order to smooth out the process. Then eventually the October payroll process is completed and client approved the payroll reports, bank payment files, and confirm the payroll payment has already hit all the employees' bank account. So then all the go live process in October were completed. So in this stage, obstacles also had been occurred because they are relating to some of the wrong bank account. We have identified it, the incorrect bank account code of one employee by using our local knowledge. Then we amended it before we passed the bank payment file to the banker in order to avoid the reject of the payment. So in our experience, we usually encounter obstacles during the multi-country payroll implementation, which need to be removed certain of the obstacle immediately, so as to not to prolong the process. Then we will liaise with clients, BDO, GPS, and other stakeholders for the best solution, and then we'll apply the local knowledge, of course, to overcome the obstacle immediately. So I think that is the end of the sharing. But however, I just want to give you some of the overview of the critical consideration on the multi-country payroll implementation, which is on this last slide from Hong Kong. Well, it is important, first of all, it is important to understand the local compliance requirement because on the multi-country payroll implementation, the local compliance requirement may not be aware of by the clients. We'll provide full support to all the stakeholders in order to help them to understand the local payroll-related compliance so as to strictly restrict to any problems for the go live, and then the non-compliance then hit the local law requirement. We also stress the importance of the documentation of clients' requirement and the local compliance requirement on the business blueprint, because this is important for future adherence to process the payroll accordingly. The third one, we'll try to ensure capturing of all the payroll data correctly and completely. We need our IT team and also the software vendors' involvement in understanding of the structures of the client's system. Then we can structure the data migration from the client system and the BDO payroll system, and then the special template or the tailor-made programs are needed for the data migration and system integration. So the last one, we'll see to understand the client's local payroll disbursement requirement and the procedures. As I said, the payroll payment for the employee as well as the MPF contribution are very important. Everyone should get paid on time, and the payment of the MPF contribution on every employee's account should be on time. So this one, we need to liaise with the local bankers and MPF trustee of the clients and get the best scenario to process the payment to them. So this is what the last, or you can say that it's the most important thing to get everyone get paid. So that is all for the Hong Kong case studies. If you have further questions, I'm pleased to answer on the Q&A section later. Thank you. So now I'm going to pass back to Stephen. Stephen?
Yeah, I'm here.
So this is your turn now.
Brilliant. Joseph, thank you very much. You know, both Joseph and Portia, thank you very much. You are really one of the best partners we work with around the world, and I think what this really highlights to people is the complexity, and this is just to consider, this is just one country. The complexity that you've got at a local level is enormous. So having the sorts of skills and expertise that Joseph has just highlighted is fundamental to a successful implementation, both at a global and local level. So it's really, really appreciated, Joseph and Portia, on taking that through. Can you see I've just gone to the next holding slide, Portia?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay. So what we've got about 8 or 9 minutes left, and I've just got a couple of areas that I just wanted to look at as well. First is what I would call about setting internal expectations. One of the most fundamental elements that we found, and if we've been through many multi-country implementations, and we had an experience of a 49-country implementation, which took over 18 months to implement, and took a significant investment on both the BDO's perspective and also the client's perspective as well. So the first one is, when you're looking at return on investment and you're looking at ROI, do not expect an immediate return. This is an investment over a longer period that must be taken into consideration, and you're looking at an ROI sometimes year 2, sometimes even year 3 after the implementation before you start seeing some headway. It also leads you to the sort of contract length that we're looking at as well for the internal expectations. Normally, at a very minimum, we would look at 3, but these are very, very rare. We're normally looking today at 5 to 7-year contracts with organizations to make sure that you can get through a multi-country implementation and also start to return, get a return on that investment up front as well. The other areas to look at around setting the expectation when you've got multiple countries, we would strongly advise you do not go big bang. We would look at working with you as a client and deciding on how many countries per phase. We would look at somewhere between 5 to 8 countries per phase, try to line them up with the beginnings of the tax years, and try and reduce the amount of backfilling of payrolls as much as possible. We would always encourage you to look at least 2 parallel runs depending on complexity, and right up front be very, very clear about what the implementation plan does and looks like, and coordinate that not only internally with a PMO, but coordinate that across each of the countries, because what we do run into sometimes is we sign a multi-country contract, We then start the implementation, and then what we find is that the local countries that we're implementing are suddenly surprised when they're suddenly being implemented and they're not lined up and the suppliers are not lined up as well. So be transparent about the implementation plan and be clear of what that's going to deliver as well. Raise issues early. If there is an issue either on the vendor side or on the client side, raise it early as part of the governance structure and make sure that everybody is clear of what's going on. The next and a really, really important area for us is getting that balance between systems and integration and knowledge and expertise. The very best multi-country payroll implementations are where there is a combination of both, where you've got a real consideration around HR systems, time and attendance systems, or other client operating platforms that you have to take into consider. What information would need to go back into your finance system from a GL interface, and looking at how the data has changed and then fed back into HR. Providing the single point of contact for all your implementations is fundamental. You must have that single point of coordination that will then be able to manage the expertise, the knowledge, and the implementation at a local level. Data aggregation is what everybody talks about when they're looking at multi-country payrolls, and technology will allow you to start to aggregate and get a view of your data around the world, so it increases your visibility. But it is no good at all if you do not have the knowledge and expertise at a local level to deliver the service. Data aggregation with no knowledge and expertise will not deliver good service for you as a client. So making sure that you've got the combination of good technology, how do you integrate with the current platforms you use today, but then how have you got the local knowledge and expertise will ensure a successful implementation. Also, the last thing is very much what we find is focus on the output. Most senior finance, senior HR, payroll people want to get data and reporting and information to ensure that that data is clean and starts to be standardized. Getting multiple different reports from multiple different countries in different currencies around the world is really, really tough for organizations to try and assimilate and understand. So having consideration around that output is really, really important. And then finally, the last sort of slide that I wanted to look at before we just do a very quick summary is that importance of the centrally coordinated model. The central coordination, which is a model that BDO has on a multi-country basis, is centrally coordinated by the global outsourcing team, which means that you've got really one conversation, one contract, a single platform and portal to communicate information in and out of, and a dedicated team. But it only works if you've got that local delivery to deliver the expertise, the knowledge, sometimes those local language questions that come up from an employee, and that strong local relationship and the engagement with the local authorities to make sure that your local payrolls are compliant. The BDO's model is how do we pull those two together through implementation and into ongoing delivery to ensure that we have got everything covered. And finally, the last slide, what we want to ultimately ensure is the right implementation and setting the right expectations will ensure your project is standardized and will be efficient ongoing for your overall multi-country process. In our experience, finding a partner that's got scalability and flexibility that will help reduce your administrative burden while delivering the quality and legislative peace of mind is always the best path that you want to take. Okay. I would like to thank my team in Hong Kong, Joseph, Portia, for your input, and also I'd like to thank everybody on the call today for really being on the call. We've got over 100 people on this call today. We have got some questions coming through. What I'm very happy to do is deal with some of the questions now as they come through, and then also deal with, I'm happy to stay online for another 20 or 30 minutes afterwards if people would like to go onto the chatter function and ask any specific questions they have. Joseph, Portia, I don't know whether you're still happy about staying online for another 20 or 30 minutes as well after the call, but we will deal with those as well.
Of course, no problem.
Thank you. No problem.
Fantastic. And Joseph, Portia, thank you very much for being online. Really great job. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah, my pleasure.
Stephen.
So we have had a number of questions coming through, and I've just had a bit of paper handed to me. So I'm not quite sure what the questions are. So we'll deal with those. I will read them out, and then I'll give sort of our perspective, but I'll throw it over to also Portia and Joseph for their thoughts as well. One question that came in was, what advice do you have to win the hearts and minds of employees? Home payroll management, especially where workers' councils are involved. That's a really great question, and it really I'll give my global perspective of what I understand, and then I'll pass it across to Portia to give that perspective as well. And if you need me to read it out again, Portia and Joseph, I will do. How do you win the hearts and minds of employees that are where there's local workers councils involved? That for me comes around communication. You have to communicate what's happening. If you remember on the slides, what I talked about was share the transition plan and the implementation plan early. One of the biggest changes, surprisingly, that we find is when people's payslips change. And what you do find is that you get an unusual response from employees when just their payslip changes. What is most important for the delivery, which is the reason why we do multiple parallel runs, is your employees continue to be paid on time and accurately. If that continues and their payslips are clearly understood and are available to them, and there are multiple different ways that payslips can be available, then normally that does overcome. We would always encourage internal PMOs to communicate not only to local HR and payroll departments, but also to your employees that there is going to be a change, and this is when the change would happen. So that would be my answer to that. I don't know, Joseph or Portia, you would have a local perspective of how you manage that locally?
We totally agree with you, what you've just said. And, from our perspective in Hong Kong, we don't actually have workers' council or something like here. Despite that, I would like to, say how we actually win the hearts and minds of our clients who ultimately are responsible for, providing the right pay and pay slips, et cetera, to the employees. Here in Hong Kong, we are very willing to accept very high accuracy rate in terms of, processing payroll. So for one of our very large clients, we are committed to provide over 99.5% accuracy to our clients, which we have never failed. And this will this includes, not just accuracy, it would also include the compliance requirements are being satisfied, all the local compliance requirements, as well as processing the payrolls timely.
Yes.
So I would believe,
on-time payment.
Yeah, so we would believe that, from the employee's perspective, it's very important to get their pay accurately and in time, as well as to ensure that they won't have any issues from the perspective of compliance.
Yeah,
so Joseph, do you have anything to add?
I need to add is that for that particular huge clients, we need to provide a very good support to their employees' inquiries. We have a hotline and also have a dedicated email address for serving employees' inquiry. We are committed to return or reply to them within certain hours, and also within the same day, replying to the employees' inquiries. So we are already achieved this successfully, and this has been running for over years. So that is also one of the ways that we win the clients' employees' minds and hearts on this kind of timely response and compliance and payment on time, clarity, and all the payroll breakdown as per their request.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you, Joseph. I hope that gives a little bit of clarity to answering that first question. The second question that I've got is what have been the typical common issues that you encounter, implicating being that you, the client, should plan to overcome these early? And I'll deal with those, and I'll also hand that over, because I think that's quite a good question, just to get issues, typical issues that come up when you're doing the implementation as well. On a global scale, probably the number one issue that we have is a lack of understanding around what organizations have in place today, which also lines up with a lack of internal buy-in from the key stakeholders. A lot of individuals will come to us and say, I'd like to operate a multi-country payroll, and I'd like to go through an RFP bid process, but then once it hits a key decision point where you're saying, okay, that looks like the direction we want to go, we now want to roll that out, we suddenly find that it suddenly stops and cannot move forward because there is not internal buy-in from the rest of the organization to do that. The second is once we get into an implementation, we suddenly find that what we were initially told and what in organizations have been told of what the current landscape of the payroll is suddenly becomes very, very different, whether that is complexity at the local level, vendor relationships and contractual obligations that make the implementation really tough. So my advice would be, at a global level, make sure you have buy-in from all the key stakeholders, HR, finance, procurement, legal, and IT, at a global scale, and then ensure that you understand the landscape of what your payroll environment looks like, as well as make sure you understand what you're looking to achieve from outsourcing as well, and be clear around your benefits. Is it increased control? Is it a reduction in overall cost? And if it is, analyze that as well. I don't know whether Joseph and Portia, you've got any commentary around sort of typical common issues that you've come across with multi-country payroll implementations in Hong Kong?
I think the most common obstacles that we encounter during the multi-country implementation for Hong Kong, I have already covered in my presentation. But in summary, we agree with your saying that the early arrangement and communication is also very important. As I mentioned before, we have to provide the full support to all stakeholders in order to get them go through all the implementation process and agreeing on the date of implementation during the different phases of the implementation. And understanding of the local compliance and also the client's requirement are also very important to enable the services can be met with the client's expectation. Something we must do is to document everything in the business blueprint, including the client's requirement. For example, what is the typical processing requirement on the basis of computation of the payroll items, as well as the local compliance, for example, kind of tax return to be delivered on certain period of time, etc. So these are, everything has to be documented and write down on the business blueprint. So everyone has to adhere to the policy and the basis of computation for future payroll process. So that is the thing that we consider important. The last one I think also needs to be addressed to is the IT's involvement. What kind of the program or template are using for the smooth data transmission or migration integration, so as to ensure if things are captured in the system correctly, and in case of any historical data need to be pulled out, that would be complete and accurate to be provided to the clients. Payment methods are also important. We need to study what kind of system or procedures that need to be adhered to in order to get everyone paid on time, without any headache, without any hiccups on the payments. So I think that is the things that we need to be overcome during the early days.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. And then I've had one other question that's come through on the chatter function as well. What are you offering to consolidate the information of different payroll systems of each BDO firm besides the BDO portal? And for those of you that are not BDO, we do use a SharePoint portal to share information, but it doesn't consolidate and provide reporting. We do have a global reporting tool that a number of clients do use that will allow you to consolidate your information on a global scale and get standardized reporting for all your payrolls, no matter what system is being used locally, because the data is consistent in terms of how it's been implemented and set up. It does speak to the importance of the implementation, that if you think about what you want to get out once you are up and running as a global organization, implementation is absolutely fundamental up front, because if you do not implement that payroll in the right way, you will not be able to get consistent reporting. And today we have a tool that's available to both clients and also is sometimes used by both payroll, finance and HR around the world. The other option that we do sometimes find is organizations say, I only want information coming through either my finance or my HR system. So we're looking at feeding data back into multiple HR platforms as well as multiple finance platforms as well. And that is sometimes the best route for consolidating data. But I hope that answers the question specifically. And as far as I'm aware, I don't believe we have any other questions. If there is anything more, please either raise your hand or send it through on the Q&A. But if that is all the questions that I have. Yeah, Karen? Yeah. Okay. So that's the first of these multi-country payroll webinars that we'll be doing. We will be doing a follow-up webinar either on payroll, or we may look at global compliance reporting or international accounting services as well over the coming months. But thank you very much to the team in Hong Kong. Joseph, Portia, fantastic job. It really, really gives people the understanding and the knowledge and the requirement of that detailed expertise at a local level in every country around the world. And I would just also like to thank everybody that has come online. I think at a limit we hit over 108 people online today that were on the call and listening in, and that included 11 people on one line from Singapore. So hi, Singapore. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to everybody as well. Karen, thank you very much for your help and support. And that is the end of the webinar. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity for sharing.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. See you.
See you. Bye-bye.